Okay, today is 14th of August. We're still in the 35th chapter of Samyutta Nikaya, Salayatana-samyutta. Now we come to Sutta 35.231. The Buddha said, Monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, if in any monk or nun lust still exists, and has not been abandoned, if hatred still exists and has not been abandoned, if delusion still exists and has not been abandoned, then even trifling forms that enter into the range of the eye obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are prominent. For what reason? Because lust still exists and has not been abandoned, hatred still exists and has not been abandoned, delusion still exists and has not been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that if we have lust, hatred, and delusion within, that any form comes before our eyes, they obsess the mind. They get obsessed by the form, similarly sounds, smells, etc. So even small forms, like trifling, unimportant forms also, once we notice it, and then we start thinking about it. So what more if they are prominent forms? That's why later you find the Buddha says not to pay attention. Then the Buddha says, suppose monks, there was a milk sap tree, an asata, or a banyan, or a pilaka, or an udambara, fresh, young, tender. If a man breaks it here and there with a sharp axe, would sap come out? Yes, noble sir. For what reason? Because there is sap. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, if the tree has got milk sap in it, you break off any part of it, or you cut it, then the milk sap will flow out, just like rubber tree. You are very familiar with rubber tree. So you cut any part of the rubber tree, the milk sap will flow out. So too monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, even trifling forms that enter into the range of the eye obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are prominent. For what reason? Because lust still exists and has not been abandoned. Hatred still exists and has not been abandoned. Delusion still exists and has not been abandoned. The same in regards to sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. Monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, if in any monk or nun lust does not exist and has been abandoned, if hatred does not exist and has been abandoned, if delusion does not exist and has been abandoned, then even prominent forms that enter into the range of the eye do not obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are trifling. For what reason? Because lust does not exist and has been abandoned. Hatred does not exist and has been abandoned. Delusion does not exist and has been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. Suppose monks, there was a milk sap tree, an asata or a banyan or a pilaka or an udambara, dried up, desiccated, past its prime. If a man breaks it here and there with a sharp axe, would sap come out? No, venerable sir. For what reason? Because there is no sap. So too monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, even prominent forms that enter into the range of the eye do not obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are trifling. For what reason? Because lust does not exist and has been abandoned. Hatred does not exist and has been abandoned. Delusion does not exist and has been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts. That's the end of the sutta. So, when the six sense objects impinge on our senses, how we react depends on how much of this lust, hatred, and delusion is within us. If you have strong lust, hatred, and delusion, then if the sense object is attractive, you will be you will have lust for it. You have craving for it. And that craving gives rise to attachment. And that attachment gives rise to suffering. You want something, you cannot get it permanently. Then you will have suffering. But on the other hand, somebody who has cultivated himself until lust, hatred and delusion has been eliminated, then whatever forms, whatever sounds, etc., come into his attention, it does not affect him because he does not have the lust, hatred and delusion. So it's very important that we remove this poison inside us, these three poisons. So actually the problem is not outside there. The problem is not outside. The problem is inside. Sometimes we think the problem is outside. No, because of this, because of that. It's not because of this and because of that out there. Because of inside us. The next sutta, 35.232. On an occasion, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Mahakotita were dwelling at Varanasi, the deer park at Isipatana. Then in the evening, the Venerable Mahakotita emerged from seclusion and approached the Venerable Sariputta. He exchanged greetings with the Venerable Sariputta, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, "How is it, friend Sariputta? Is the eye the factor of forms, or are forms the factor of the eye? Is the ear the factor of sounds, or are sounds the factor of the ear?" etc. For the other sense bases also. And Venerable Sariputta replied, "Friend Kotita, the eye is not the factor of forms, nor are forms the factor of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the factor there. Similarly, the ear is not the factor of sounds, nor are sounds the factor of the ear, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the factor there. Similarly, for the other sense bases. Suppose, friend, a black ox and a white ox were yoked together by a single harness or yoke. Would one be speaking rightly if one were to say, the black ox is the factor of the white ox, the white ox is the factor of the black ox? And Venerable Kotita said, "No, friend, the black ox is not the factor of the white ox, nor is the white ox the factor of the black ox, but rather the single harness or yoke by which the two are yoked together. That is the factor there." And Venerable Sariputta said, "So too, friend, the eye is not the factor of forms." And he repeated what he said, nor are forms the factor of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the factor there. The ear is not the factor of sounds, nor are sounds the factor of the ear, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the factor there. Similarly for the other sense bases. If, friend, the eye were the factor of forms, or if forms were the factor of the eye, this living of the holy life could not be discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. But since the eye is not the factor of forms, nor are forms the factor of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both is the factor there, the living of the holy life is discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. If, friend, the ear were the factor of sounds, or if sounds were the factor of the ear, this living of the holy life could not be discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. Similarly for the other sense bases. In this way too, friend, it may be understood how that is so. There exists in the Blessed One the eye. The Blessed One sees a form with the eye, yet there is no desire and lust in the Blessed One. The Blessed One is well liberated in mind. There exists in the Blessed One the ear. The Blessed One hears a sound with the ear, yet there is no desire and lust in the Blessed One. Similarly for the other sense bases. In this way, friend, it can be understood how the eye is not the factor of forms, nor are forms the factor of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both is the factor there. Similarly for the other sense bases. That's the end of the sutta. So here, you see, for each sense base, if you take, for example, the eye, when you have the eye and forms come before the eye, then eye consciousness arises. And the coming together of the three, the eye, the forms, and the eye consciousness is the making of contact. When there is contact, feeling arises. And if the feeling is a pleasant feeling, then there is craving for it. If the feeling is an unpleasant feeling, then there is aversion towards it. So our mind is moved by craving and aversion depending on the object. And sometimes if the feeling that arises is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then the feeling, then there is no craving and no aversion. In fact, generally people, if the feeling is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then people become ignorant of it, not aware of it. So the problem here is not the eye, the problem is not the forms, the problem is the feeling that arises, giving rise to craving or aversion. So a mind that is untrained, undeveloped, it is moved by the external sense objects. The external sense objects either give you craving or give you aversion, leading to hatred. So it's because that is an undeveloped mind. So it's very important to develop our mind so that whatever comes, impinges on our six sense basis, that we don't react in an unwholesome way, in an unskillful way. If we react in an unskillful way, for example, we crave for beautiful form, then since you cannot have that form all the time, then suffering will come. But if you realize the nature of the six sense bases, that everything is impermanent, there's no happiness to be found from clinging to anything, then you don't react, then you will not have suffering. So the desire and lust, that is the factor, that is the factor that binds us in samsara. The next sutta is 35.234. On one occasion, the Venerable Ananda and the Venerable Udayi were dwelling at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Then in the evening, the Venerable Udayi emerged from seclusion and approached the Venerable Ananda. He exchanged greetings with the Venerable Ananda, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said, "Friend Ananda, in many ways the nature of this body has been declared, disclosed, and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this body is not self. Is it possible to explain the nature of this consciousness in a similar way, to teach, proclaim, establish, disclose, analyze and elucidate it thus? For such a reason, this consciousness is not self." Stop here for a moment. So here, Venerable Udayi says that the Buddha has taught that this body is not self. Is it possible in a similar way to say, to explain that consciousness is not self? These two things, the body and consciousness or mind, the Buddha says it's much easier to see that the body is not self, because we can see the body changing year by year as you grow older. And then also you can see not only your body, you can see your parents' body, your grandparents' body, your relatives and all that. They grow old, they become sick and they die. So it's much easier to see that the body is not the self. It's very hard to see the mind or consciousness as not the self. That's why here is asking Venerable Ananda. And Venerable Ananda said, "It is possible, friend Udayi. Doesn't I consciousness arise in dependence on the I and forms?" And he said, "Yes, friend. If the cause and condition for the arising of I consciousness would cease completely and totally without remainder, could I consciousness be discerned? No, friend. In this way, friend, this has been declared, disclosed and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this consciousness is not self. Let's stop here for a moment. So here, Ananda says, I consciousness arises on condition that two things are present. The I must be there, forms must come before the I. With these two conditions, I consciousness arises. So since I consciousness arises dependent on these two things, the I and forms. And these two things, the I and forms, are also impermanent. Right? So when they cease, so if you say that I consciousness is the self, then when the I and the form cease, that means the condition for I consciousness to arise ceases, then naturally I consciousness will cease. So if I consciousness ceases, then where is the self? Right? If there's a self, it must exist all the time. But if it arises and then passes away, arises and passes away, it cannot be the self. The idea of the self, atta, is something that is permanent, that is never changing, that there is a core, that unchanging, which you can identify as the self. But if it changes and it can disappear, then how can it be the self? Right? So Nanda is trying to say, for the reason that I consciousness is dependent on conditions, and when the conditions cease, then I consciousness also must cease. So it cannot be, it is not self. Similarly, ear consciousness arises in dependence on the ear and sounds. So in a similar way, ear consciousness also is not the self when the ear and sounds cease. And similarly for the other senses. In this way, friend, it has been declared, disclosed and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this consciousness is not self. Suppose, friend, a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, would take a sharp axe and enter a forest. There he would see the trunk of a large plantain tree, that means a banana tree, straight, fresh, without a fruit but core. He would cut it down at the root, cut off the crown, and unroll the coil. As he unrolls the coil, he would not find even soft wood, let alone hardwood. So too, a monk does not recognize either a self or anything belonging to a self in these six bases for contact, these six sense bases. Since he does not recognize anything thus, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Being unagitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands, destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. That's the end of the sutta. So the Buddha says, if a monk sees that the six sense bases and all the things connected with the six sense bases are impermanent and not self, it means that the whole world is impermanent and not self, because the whole world exists in the six sense bases, the six consciousness. So when he does not cling to anything in the world, then he becomes disenchanted, and becomes dispassionate, and he attains liberation. 35.235. Monks, I will teach you a Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning. Listen to that. And what, monks, is the Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning? It would be better, monks, for the eye faculty to be lacerated by a red-hot iron pin, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in a form cognizable by the eye. For if consciousness should stand tight to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. I'll stop here for a moment. So the Buddha says, instead of using the eye to grasp the signs and the features in any form that you see, it is better to take a red hot iron pin and hack or poke the eye until it cannot see, because the Buddha says if you use eye consciousness and you see forms that are pleasing and you are satisfied in the signs and features of the form and you cling to it, then if you die at that moment, you'll go to rebirth in hell or the animal realm. So dangerous is the clinging to the six sense objects. And the Buddha continued, it would be better, monks, for the ear faculty to be lacerated by a sharp iron stake, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in sound cognizable by the ear. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It would be better, monks, for the nose faculty to be lacerated by a sharp nail cutter, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in odor cognizable by the nose. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It will be better, monks, for the tongue faculty to be lacerated by a sharp razor, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in taste cognizable by the tongue. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It would be better, monks, for the body faculty to be lacerated by a sharp spear, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the signs and the features in a tactile object cognizable by the body. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It would be better, monks, to sleep, for sleep, I say, is barren for the living, fruitless for the living, insensibility for the living, than to think such thoughts as would induce one who has come under their control to bring about a schism in the Sangha. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying it's better to destroy all the six sense organs than to use them to enjoy sensual objects. Because if you use your sense organs to enjoy sensual objects and you cling to them, at the moment when you die you are still attached to them, then it's possible for you to go to hell or the animal realm. The last one, this last one is not to enjoy, but if you use your mind to think unwholesome thoughts, for example, to split the Sangha of monks, cause a schism, then it's better not to use the mind and go to sleep better. In regard to this, monks, the learned noble disciple reflects thus: leave off lacerating the eye faculty with a red-hot iron pin, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the eye is impermanent, forms are impermanent, eye consciousness is impermanent, eye contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the ear faculty with a sharp iron stick, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the ear is impermanent, sounds are impermanent, ear consciousness is impermanent. Ear contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with ear contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the nose faculty with a sharp nail cutter, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the nose is impermanent, odors are impermanent, nose consciousness is impermanent, Nose contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with nose contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the tongue faculty with a sharp razor, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the tongue is impermanent. Tastes are impermanent. Tongue consciousness is impermanent. Tongue contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with tongue contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the body faculty with a sharp spear, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the body is impermanent. Tactile objects are impermanent. Body consciousness is impermanent. Body contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with body contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off sleeping. Let me attend only to this. So the mind is impermanent. Mental phenomena or thoughts are impermanent. Mind consciousness is impermanent. Mind contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with mind contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Seeing thus, monks, the learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards the eye, forms, eye consciousness, eye contact. Whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition. And similarly for the other 6 sense bases. So he experienced revulsion towards the 6 sense bases, the 6 sense objects, the 6 sense consciousness, contact, and the feeling that arises. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it's liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. This, monks, is the Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning. So here the Buddha says, instead of going to the extreme step of destroying your 6 sense faculties, the Buddha says, learned noble disciple having wisdom should only attend to the fact that the 6 sense bases are impermanent, the 6 sense objects are impermanent, the 6 sense consciousness are impermanent, the 6 sense contacts are impermanent, the feeling that arises at the 6 sense bases are also impermanent. So when you realize that they are all impermanent, that means everything in the world is impermanent. So you feel, the noble disciple will feel revulsion, disenchanted with the 6 sense bases, with everything in the world. And then experiencing disenchantment, he becomes dispassionate, and that will lead to liberation. This reminds me, like in India, a lot of ascetics, they practice these Dhutanga practices, the ascetic practices to suffer, they think, to wear away their sins, wear away their evil karma, they think. So they do things like going naked, do things like living in the forest, living off the fruits that fall in the forest and the roots of trees and all that, plants. So that is one extreme for people who don't understand the Dhamma. The Buddha himself went through all these extreme conditions, like starving himself until he ate 1 grain of rice a day. So later he relaxed and practiced the middle way and attained enlightenment. And after he attained enlightenment, he told his disciples not to practice all these unbeneficial ascetic practices. Instead, to direct your mind in the right way, like contemplating impermanence, contemplating suffering, contemplating not self. That is the right way. Without having to suffer so much, you can attain enlightenment. So similarly here, this sutta, if you go to one extreme, because you think that the 6 sense bases is the cause, because of contact at the 6 sense bases, then feeling arises, and feeling gives rise to suffering when you cling to it, right? So if a person doesn't have much wisdom, he thinks the cause of all the suffering is the 6 sense bases. So go and destroy the 6 sense bases, give something burning and burn it out, burn out the eye, burn out the ear, the nose and all that. The Buddha says you don't have to go to that extreme. Simple way is just to contemplate impermanence in all these 6 sense bases. then you don't become attached to it, then you can attain liberation